Team, there's a lot of things that can happen in contested environments, whether we're in a urban environment, whether or not we're in a rural environment. If we just look at the past, right, there's been a lot of instances of civil unrest. And most of these moments have only lasted short periods of time, and they've been isolated to a geographic area. Obviously, some of them have been well coordinated and planned, and others have not been. In this video, I want to go through an immediate action drill. That, in other words, here's an event, then what, right? Too many times I think we have this general idea of I'm going to do X if Y happens. But what we really need to do is take a step back, look at things through a wider lens, and say, if this happens and I do X, the second, third, and fourth order of effect, right? We're going to bypass the third and the first or whatever. We want to think about the long-term effects, and those long-term effects could be short-term, right? It could still be talking about that hour or that half a day or that day. And then say, based off of these effects, now I have a new cause, which could result in other people taking specific actions, which then in turn lead me to take different actions, and it just spider webs from there. The knee-jerk reactions to things is probably not in our best interest. Same with, even getting up to a critical event that triggers a response from us. Like, there's a lot of things that have to happen to get there. But maybe that's for another video. In this one, we're going to pull an immediate action drill from the SHTF field manual. And we'll jib-jab about this. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments down below about what you would do in this particular scenario. Now, in the manual, and I specifically didn't give an answer to the immediate action drills. It's just food for thought, things that I think that we need to consider and work through these hazards in order to find controls to mitigate risk. And there are a ton of variables, not least of which is the geographic location of where we're at. Threat, how permissive the environment has been, how well you know the area, how long you've been in the area, just all kinds of variables. So this will be start off with visual contact during your route. Suppose that you're driving and you discover that you're being followed or observed by a static observer. What are your actions? You could confirm through counter reconnaissance and obtain as much detailed information about the identity of the individuals. Alter your route using a dogleg or other avenue of approach. Stop movement and approach or otherwise confront the individual. So let's say you're being followed, right? So this kind of gave you two drills to work through. Let's say you're being followed. How do you know that you're being followed? Well, as a general rule for me, if somebody takes two of the same turns, then I probably need to be a little bit more on edge, right? Now, certainly, in today's age, and I struggled with this coming back from a deployment, getting back in the United States in the early 2000s, I struggled with people who I perceived could be following me, right? And I ended up doing some evasive driving. Probably scared the shit out of my wife. And then I had to, over time, begin to calm myself down and remind myself that I'm in the United States. It's relatively safe. These people are probably just going in the same direction that I am. But here, in thinking about the SHTF, we're probably not in the exact same environment and operational environment that we're in right now, that you've been living in your daily grind, day in and day out. Regardless of whatever that triggering event is that has taken place, you're now in an environment that has a much higher risk to it. So you're driving, maybe you're going to go pick up some supplies, maybe you're dropping some supplies off. Right? And in war, man, society continues to drive on. So maybe you're going to work and you notice that there is somebody who you believe is following you. What do you do? So if we back up from this, I would submit to you that you probably need to pull out some maps of your local area and work through primary and alternate routes, work through areas that are some choke points, if you will, work through areas that you know beforehand that the danger areas may be a little bit stronger than others, right? One of these areas is, quite frankly, the moment that we are leaving our home, our castle, and those moments leading up to our destination, because odds are there's probably only that last stretch, there's only one way in and one way out. And odds are you're probably only using your primary routes. And I would submit to you that if this has hit the fan, then you need to immediately begin to using your alternate routes. And your primary route to get to your destination should not be the primary route to come back. And your alternate routes to get to where you're going should not be your alternate routes coming back. Like, they should be four complete different routes to get somewhere and to get back. Let's say you're driving and somebody's taking a couple of the same turns. What do you do? Well, if the operational environment has a little bit more risks and hazards to it, you probably need to think, I need to do something. You could mash on the gas pedal and see if they do the same. You could take a dog leg, and this is a great technique or tactic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to maybe drive into a bank, right? Just an example, the parking lot for a bank. They all have tellers, right? And so they all have easy roundabouts to get in and to get out. And most of the time they have multiple entrances and exits into the parking lot of the bank. Regardless of where it is, this is just an example. Based off of where you're at and when this happens, you would have to use what's available. But the point is, you drive into something that nobody in their right mind immediately turns around and exits. Nobody would drive into the parking lot of a bank, drive through the tellers, and then leave moving in an opposite direction, or even back in the same direction, right? People go into a bank to stop, to pull out, to go through the ATM, to talk to the teller. So when you make an action like this, what you're doing is confirming whether or not somebody is actually tailing you. And then once you have made that confirmation, now you can move through a second immediate action rule should it be necessary. Maybe it's going to find the closest secure location that you can. You probably don't want to go back to your castle because now you're taking the threat back home. So what would you do in this event? You know that somebody's following you. Do you want to stop and engage? Do you want to try to lose them, right? Odds are in when this has hit the fan, law enforcement is probably even more on edge. So if you begin making evasive driving actions, swerving in and out of traffic, cutting a hard right from the far left lane, or taking a left from the far right lane, and all these other high-speed, low-drag things, you're probably going to bring even more attention to yourself, which could or could not be a bad thing. Maybe you do want to go to that local sheriff's department parking lot. odds are you're probably not going to get into a gunfight there by somebody else. Because this person, what could they possibly be looking at you for? They're probably looking for a soft target to steal a vehicle, to steal whatever it is that you may have inside. If somebody, in environments like these, good people become desperate and are looking for opportunities. So just something to think about. But we also talked about a static observer, right? So let's say you're driving and you've become lost in your sauce, and you're constantly using your primary route, and you notice somebody sitting in a park bench. And because you don't alter your times, you're leaving at the same time to get to work and to back. You notice this person is here every single time. What do you do? What kind of detailed notes are you taking about this individual who 3 days ago wasn't there but is now here every single time? And you can tell you get this feeling that they're observing you. And then you see the same person, maybe it's a week later, 3 or 4 blocks up, at where you normally take turns. Now it becomes a little bit more obvious that there's some sort of observation to find your patterns. And this is why it's important to not set patterns, right? We talked about having primary and alternate routes, but do you alter what time that you leave your home in order to get to where you're going for your normal daily routines, right? Do you constantly leave at 7 o'clock each and every single day? And you constantly are forced to take a series of turns to get to your primary route? Well, odds are people are watching these and finding your patterns. They're casing you out. In the same way that criminals would case out a target in order to find the patterns, this is what could very well possibly be happening to you. And again, I'm not suggesting that these are things that happen on the day-to-day basis, or normal dudes living their life. Now, if you are a higher value target, this could be happening to you right now, right? It happens to celebrities and to dudes with money all the time. But when it's hit the fan, you need to have this heightened state of awareness. You need to have a little bit more hypervigilance about you and about yourself and about your operations. So you need to be much more aware, and having that yellow mindset. Your head's on a swivel all the time, constantly receiving information and making mental notes about what's happening and making decisions based off of what you see. So you have somebody who's observing you, and it's obvious to you now. Maybe it's after several days of watching, because seeing one person at a bus stop, that's no big deal, right? Seeing a person at a bus stop several days in a row is not necessarily a big deal. But if they are taking notes, if they're there's just some other variables they're sitting at this bus stop that just don't seem right, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't sit right, then you probably need to trust your gut. Now, maybe the next day you take a completely separate route, and now you don't see this person anymore. Boom, you got them off you a little bit. But then what they could have done is backed up their point of surveillance to figure out what new route that you're taking. So then, a couple days later, if you still see individuals that you hadn't seen before, especially if it's that same individual, now you have something to really be concerned about. Again, protect your castle at all times. It's where your family is, and you don't want to bring any more threats home. You don't want to bring any threats home, regardless of any more threats home. So what do? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments. You know that somebody is observing you. They are taking notes of your patterns. what do you begin to do, right? A lot of food for thought here. Team, I really appreciate y'all taking the time to have this conversation. Your comments down below not only help each other, it helps me as well, as we all work on mastering our craft and developing our tactical virtue. I hope these are scenarios that you never find yourself in, but odds are if it hits the fan, you or somebody that you know will. And so it's important to sit down as a family and to work through these scenarios, just like you do with, if you have a fire in the house, what do? You have to have immediate action drills. So maybe you get out the whiteboard and you start talking through things. Make sure that you're right. Make sure that your family's right. Talk to your community group, your pals, your amigos, your cohorts, and we'll begin to working through these things, because it may be sexy to say, well, what we need to do and train on is, how to approach somebody's house and take it back, because now we're talking about shooting, and shooting is sexy, right? But what we need to do is work much before that on those key, critical, individual, team, and collective tasks before we ever even get to those much more extreme points. Hope that makes sense, team. I appreciate you guys. Until then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked.
We know you're out there! Come to my voice!
Team, if you want to master your craft and develop your tactical virtue, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on future content. Consider becoming a channel member. It's going to give you exclusive access to content not available to anybody else. I appreciate you guys. Until then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked.